Welcome to our introduction on moves in Oclef Notation. This is a key component of the Oclef Teaching Method and will be so valuable in your development as a future piano educator with us. As advanced musicians, you already know how to read music intervallically, and you've developed this ability to quickly translate notation into physical movements. But for beginning students, this translation is really challenging. The Oclef notation system bridges this gap by visually representing hand movements directly on the score. And this helps beginning students to see what advanced pianists like you are perceiving automatically. Today, we're going to focus on just a few fundamental movements. Okay, let's start with the crossover and cross under. These are movements that you use instinctively when playing scales and other passages. To you, this happens naturally and without much thought. But to a beginner student, it's actually quite tricky. When they see a passage from finger 5 to finger 1 with too many notes in between, like this, for a single hand position, they don't automatically recognize this as a crossover like you do. That's why we use Oclef notation. And this will teach students how to see these movements. So for a crossover, you'd have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then between this one, this next 2, and the next 1, you draw that crossover symbol. Similarly, with a cross under, when you start with your thumb on a note and you see another thumb marking, like here, your brain automatically understands that this is going to be a cross under after finger 3. However, beginning students don't have this intuition yet. So to clarify, a cross under is where you have a finger, typically the thumb, like this, 1, 2, 3, will pass under the hand while also taking on a new position, right there. Whereas a crossover is where one finger passes over another to reach its new destination, again, creating a hand position change. Okay, let's move forward. There's a third type called the pivot crossover. This happens all the time, and this is actually one of the first movements in most method books, apart from simple shifts. In a pivot crossover, you have a natural 5-finger position, but then you need to reach a note outside of that position. In this case, it's the F sharp. Like playing in G major and you need to reach F sharp, this regular crossover would not be correct because this would take on a new position. You're not changing hand position. Instead, you're temporarily extending beyond your position and then returning. You anchor your thumb as a pivot point and cross over your second finger to the F sharp. The hand slightly rotates to facilitate this movement. And all of you already know how to do this because you've done it thousands of times. And when executing this, make sure that you encourage the student to have a free wrist and they're simply rotating over the thumb. Moving forward, the next moves are shift up and shift down, which can also be called shift right and shift left. These are two of the earliest movements that you'll see constantly in the beginning repertoire. They usually occur in sequences. A student plays in one position and then shifts gently to the left, then shifts again. Or if it's in the right hand, it'll start in one position, shifting up, and then maybe shifting back down. Sometimes it's a series of shifts in one direction as well. What defines a shift? It's simply where your hand moves towards a higher or lower register, but within the scope of a hand position. You can't have a shift up by 2 octaves. That would be called something else. That would be a jump. A shift must be within the interval of the natural hand position. So for example, if your 5th finger is on D, and then your 1st finger is on G, after you play this 5-finger scale here, You still maintain the position into the next section where your thumb still plays the G. However, once you get to this E, it's not going to be a stretch. The student will shift their hand up by a step. So the new position will be finger 1 on this A here. Similarly, a shift down, as we scroll down here, basically moves everything to the left by a step or a skip. And typically, shifts involve steps or skips. You can shift by a fourth, but it's not common. And shifts by a fifth usually involve a different move called a finger switch. Okay, your assignment. During your Kaizen shadowing sessions, please observe how professors are using these notations with beginning students. And pay attention specifically to how they mark the scores with these symbols, how they verbally explain the movements, and how students respond to the notation system. Your assignment is to identify when the professors in Kaizen are using these movement notations, note how these symbols help beginning students overcome specific technical challenges, and to practice adding these notations to a simple piece of music that your professor in this class will provide for you. Also consider documenting how the notation impacts the student's understanding and performance. Okay, in our next session, we'll introduce additional symbols and discuss how to determine which movements are used based on the student's skill level and the piece's challenges. Remember, as pedagogy students, your goal is to make the implicit explicit. These notations help you to transform what you do automatically into clear instructions for beginning students in stage 1. Bit by bit and step by step, we're making piano easier for beginning students by helping them understand the very next step for them to improve.